Welcome to the latest episode of X Factor. I'm so pleased today to be joined by Ben Riefe, who is a managing director with Benford Capital Partners. Full disclosure, they happen to be a client of Falcon's, so we know them a good bit, but very excited that Ben's with us today to unpack a topic that I think is sort of generally on everyone's mind, but there's not a ton of awareness around what it actually means, and that is how you build an investment thesis in partnership with a private equity firm as an executive. So on that note, Ben, so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah, Rob, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here today, and I really appreciate the relationship with Falcon. My plug for Falcon is that they're a terrific resource, but we try not to share that too broadly because you all get busy, and we have had a great experience working with a lot of the executives that you've helped us place over the years. So happy to be here, and happy to share more about how we think about value creation and in partnership with the leadership teams that we build at these companies.
Yeah, terrific. I have to laugh because I think most of our clients are excited to see us grow as long as it's with them.
That's right. You got to keep it close to the vest.
Yeah, great. So Ben, just tell us just a bit about your background and a bit about Benford, please.
Yeah, for sure. So myself, I've been in private equity most of my career, started in investment banking and leveraged finance, and then transitioned onto the buy side in 2001 with a larger firm in the Chicago area. I went to go work for one of their portfolio companies, Roundy's Supermarkets, and the CEO and the CFO of that business, which was my first ground level view at constructing and building a value creation plan in partnership with management. And that was a highly successful deal. We grew that business significantly. We did a lot of M&A. We were building up a store base in Wisconsin while also selling off non-core distribution assets outside of the state of Wisconsin, and built the leading supermarket retailer in the state of Wisconsin, which was eventually sold to Kroger. But I wanted to get back on the buy side, went to business school at Kellogg in 2005 and met my partner at Benford in 2006. He had founded Benford Capital in 2004 to focus on investments in the lower middle market, building on his experience at Prospect Partners, another successful lower middle market firm in the Chicago area. And I joined him full time in 2007 when I graduated, and we've been partners ever since and focused consistently on building smaller founder and family held companies, institutionalizing those businesses, building the team, professionalizing the company, creating a clear, coherent growth strategy for the business, potentially executing on M&A. It's not core to what we do, but a lot of our businesses do complete some add-ons during our ownership period, and then selling those businesses up market to a larger private equity fund or a strategic buyer. And we've had a lot of success doing that over the years. As a firm, we've completed over 50 acquisitions. We're currently investing out of our second institutional fund. It's a $200 million committed fund with a terrific group of limited partners. And we now have 15 full-time people on our team at Benford Capital, including 3 full-time operating partners, which is a differentiator for us in the lower middle market. We're very hands-on, and as we'll talk about more here today, operationally oriented, and one of them is staffed with our management teams and with our deal teams on each of our portfolio companies.
Yep, sounds great. And for those of you out there who are considering investment from private equity, Benford certainly knows their way around the lower middle market and the nuances of how to help a great but emerging company scale. So that's great. So we wanted to talk through the value creation plan and how that kind of originates from, okay, you've got an investment thesis that left you open-minded to a particular kind of deal based on its sector, business model, or end market. But then when you get your hands on the deal and you start to think about maybe an LOI and underwriting it, you start to develop a more meaningful thesis. And then once you close on that business, it's time to get down to the work of creating the value creation plan. And I think one of the things I like to demystify for folks that are newer to private equity is that the strategy behind a lot of these deals is pretty straightforward, which is why we're tasked with finding executives who are really indexed toward execution. So let's fast forward to, you've kind of got the thesis rounded out at a high level. You kind of understand the general strategy that you want to undertake through organic growth, some add-ons, expanding the TAM. And then that leads us to kind of the value creation plan. So how do you partner with management to approach that plan and then create value over the whole period?
Yeah, no, sure, Rob. And by the way, it's something we're really passionate about too. I think across our partnership, our favorite thing to do as investors is that from the time we get a business under LOI, developing the strategy, partnering with the team through the execution of that plan over our 5 to 7 year hold period. That's what we have a lot of fun doing and have a lot of success doing. But it really starts for us at LOI. And you're right, to demystify, I mean, what is a value creation plan? At LOI, it's really a 2 to 3 page document that goes through each key area of the business and industry and helps us prioritize what are we trying to accomplish, what do we see as opportunities for this business, for this team, this business as it's positioned within this industry, and then what are our goals in the first year and the second year, in the third year. And it's a living, breathing document. It changes year to year, and it changes a lot through our initial underwriting, because that's when we're really, again, getting to know the team, the business, and the industry much, much better. But once we've drafted that post LOI, we're sharing it, right away before we close with key members of the team. A typical deal profile for us would be, and I'll talk in more specifics around a couple of case studies as we get into this as well, but a typical deal profile for us would be either a recapitalization where we're partnering with a younger founder who wants to keep going and keep building the team, or more of a retiring founder or retiring family dynamic where we're backing some key people within the company, but there's a bigger kind of team build going along with that investment. And again, we're engaging with either the partner, with either the founder, the ongoing CEO, or key members of the team that we might be recruiting into the business during due diligence.
At the risk of asking the obvious, what is a value creation plan? And do you generally work with a template or a document from prior deals?
Yeah. So yes, we do work with a template. It's, I mean, very specifically, it's a 2 to 3 page PowerPoint deck with 2 or 3 columns. And the first column is just organized around key areas of the business. So the management team, the industry, the specific organic growth levers, the inorganic or M&A growth levers. And then the second column is kind of state of play today for that business, for that team, for that industry. And the third column is what are we trying to accomplish? So for example, again, just I think examples help put this more to light. We bought a business in 2018 called Specialty Sales. The company was founded in the late 90s. The founder was stepping away from the business. We were backing his VP of sales and transitioning him into the president role. So from a team perspective, kind of state of play of the business at LOI was retiring founder. Founder is still engaged in the business, very commercially oriented and also product focused. A VP of sales who's never been a president before. So we're kind of highlighting that. And the company has no CFO, no kind of finance function in place. So the year one goals and the value creation plan, and we were talking to Greg, the founder, and Don, the VP of sales, very openly about this and very constructively during LOI, was let's work with Don and define his role and how that's going to change as he takes the president role. We started a recruiting process, which FALCON led, by the way, for the CFO search right away when we got it under LOI and started interviewing candidates. And then we also identified a need to add at least another one additional salesperson in year one to backstop some of what Don was doing so that he could step into the president role. And then as it relates to Greg, the founder, we wanted to make sure that he would remain engaged and take a board seat and still help set the strategic direction in partnership with Benford Capital post-closing. So that's kind of a summary of the team portion of the value creation plan for that investment. And then it would be similar for the industry. We identified this was a business that was a niche market leader. They had established the business, had a razor blade model. They sold consumable products that were used in their proprietary systems to dairy farms, and to keep it kind of simple for purposes of this discussion. But there were other players in the space that had either copied their model or had a slightly different model as it relates to a system and a consumable. And there were a couple of those that we really wanted to buy. So again, on the value creation plan, it was, from an industry perspective, clearly a dominant niche market leader. How do we enhance that value proposition relative to the competition over time? And then who are these little other competitors, and can we buy them? So that's kind of the industry part of that plan. And then the company and the organic growth plan, what we identified up front was a business that was really strong geographically in California. California is the largest dairy state in the country, and they had very recently opened up a facility in Idaho, again another large dairy state. But we were looking at other areas of the country where we could grow organically by opening up additional distribution depots and add additional salespeople and organically penetrate geographies like Wisconsin and Texas. So again, in that third column, it was timing and developing and site selection for those new geographies. So that's just an example of, again, high level what would be kind of on the page. And then we're talking about those key areas of value creation and growth and team development with the owner, with the president from very early on in the process.
Yeah, sounds great. And I think what comes to mind for me is a constant reminder that private equity does a lot of things well. One of them is to simplify concepts into, what you're saying here is a 2 to 3 page deck. I think to the uninitiated, they might presume that a value creation plan is a lot more exhaustive than that. But is it fair to say it's sort of the 20% that you can focus on that's going to create 80% of the value?
Yeah, not necessarily. I would say we're trying to capture the big value drivers on that page, and there's more that goes into it. So like, opening a new site in Texas, there's a lot that goes into that, right? We're trying to simplify it and synthesize it so that we stay focused on the right priorities. But once we make the decision collectively, and that was a post-closing decision, so we closed. Fast forward 6 to 12 months later, and in partnership with the leadership team, we're looking at sites in Texas, and there's a very detailed execution plan around that. Yeah, I think what's helpful up front is that we try to paint a clear, well synthesized view of where we want to go over time, and then it just also creates a simple document to be able to go back and revisit each year along with the budgeting process. So it's living and breathing. We'll drill down, we'll go deep on specific projects in partnership with management. Management will lead a lot of those initiatives too. I mean, once we opened the facility in Texas and then wanted to open another facility in Wisconsin, by that point, it's a well-oiled process with a really highly capable, fully formed team. And we just green-lighted them, again, while reviewing the budget and understanding the lease costs and the capital costs, green-lighted them to go do that.
Yeah, to be sure, and let me clarify for our listeners, I don't mean to imply that private equity is not into the details, because they absolutely are. So anything that lives in the 2 to 3 page value creation plan is backed up by exceptionally detailed plans behind it that are going to be executed for sure. But to your point, that sort of North Star, that clear document that keeps everybody on the same page, and kind of in the blink of an eye, you can look at the deal 2 to 3 years in and have a feel for how you're doing. against the stated initiatives over that 5 to 7 year period. So when in a deal, or what stage, I guess, of the deal do you start to put everything together on the VCP?
Yeah, it's a good question. Pretty early on. I mean, we start like pre LOI when we're still in the underwriting phase and developing our thoughts around how do we price this asset, what are the risks, what are the growth opportunities. We're working internally with what we call a heat map, and outlines um, it outlines for our junior investment team members all the areas that we focus on in any business. And that's been put together just based on 20 plus years of experience in the lower middle market. And I should also mention up front here too, within the 4 industries that we've focused on consistently going back to 2004, those are food and consumer, ag products and services, which specialty sales falls into that bucket, industrial technology, and B2B e-commerce. So the heat map, the screening criteria, if you will, is just another more generic way to describe our heat map. And then the value creation plans, they're each nuanced based on the sector and the industry that we're investing in, but they're proven at this point. Again, they were developed organically over 20 plus years of doing this and 50 plus investments. And it's a really good starting point. It's also just really good, kind of a really good training ground, a good way to onboard. Like we have new associates starting every year. They're typically with us for 2 to 3 years before they go back to business school. And then, but it provides that roadmap to get them up to speed quickly and to really understand how we as a firm assess risk and growth and an opportunity. But the heat map would be the starting point. And then by the time we get to a management presentation and start to really kind of dig into the company and the industry, we're formulating our thoughts on what could be the value drivers for this business. And again, some of that comes from pattern recognition, industry experience. It's not just the partners at Benford Capital either. We have a broad network of executive advisors who have been valued board members to prior companies, CEOs that we've worked with in current and prior lives, again, across the entire partnership. And we're relying on their expertise, oftentimes within that specific niche or a specific subvertical of that industry, to help us outline and formulate those thoughts. And then when we get to the LOI phase, like I mentioned earlier, that's and post LOI, we know we've got exclusivity and we're working towards a closing. That's where the value creation plan really gets drafted, and then it's shared with the leadership team, as I was describing in the specialty sales example.
You mentioned that you start to share it with management as early as the LOI phase of the process. That, I guess, on the surface feels a little early to me, but I'm sure there's good reason for it. Why is that a good time to start introducing it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 2 primary reasons. One, it's a really good test case for like what's going to be like to work with this team, with this owner, with this leadership team. And it's funny, we have a check box on our heat map. It's the life's too short checkbox. So we want to partner with really engaging, smart, forward-thinking leaders that are open to change, that are open to looking at things through a different lens, that are open to outside help. And again, it's not just Ed or myself; it's the collective, the collective skills or the collective skill set that our team and executive partners and board members can bring to bear. And this doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. I mean, when you look at 1,000 deals per year, and you've acquired a lot of companies in the lower middle market, if you get into that discussion during diligence and there's quite a bit of resistance or a mentality of we got this just the way we want it and we don't want anybody thinking about growth or change or add-on acquisitions, that might not be a situation that we want to spend time on, because these are long-term partnerships, 5 to 7 year partnerships. So again, that early process is a really good indicator of what is it going to be like to work with these folks. And I mean, we're also cognizant, we also don't want to do too much too fast. So we take stewardship really, really seriously, and we're investing in successful businesses that have, again, for the most part, leadership positions within what they do. A lot of them have been around for 20, 40, 60, sometimes 80 plus years. We bought a business last year that's been around for over 100 years. And so we're very respectful of that, and we don't want to do too much too fast. We don't want to institute too much change, but there does need to be a willingness to kind of take the treadmill up from, if they're at a 3 or a 4 up to a 7 or a 8 over time, for us to achieve our goals as investors and to create the kind of growth from a returns perspective that kind of makes that a good situation to work on. And then the other reason that we like to get into it at LOI phase is that the first year of a new private equity investment, which again, the executives that you talk to that have successfully worked in PE backed environments get this. It's just very important for a lot of reasons. There's a modest amount of leverage on the business. You're trying to make 1 or 2 key hires typically. And it's hard. I mean, hiring people into lower middle market businesses, Rob, as you and the FALCON team knows, it takes time. And so gelling on that, gelling on the plan, getting those hiring processes kicked off, really understanding the job spec and what is this new person going to do, if it's a CFO or if it's a VP of sales. Again, those are very common hires for us within the first 12 months of a new investment. And the faster that we can get those folks on the team, the faster that we can start to execute the plan. So again, that was a long-winded way of saying the 2 primary reasons for sharing it so early is it's a good test of the future partnership, and we want to get a head start on the recruiting and team build component because it's time consuming, and we need those key folks on the team at company level to help us get done what we all want to get done.
Yeah, no question. So let's fast forward. Let's presume you've closed the deal. You've got a brand new partnership with the founder or CEO of the company. How do you begin to prioritize and decide what to do first?
Yeah. That's a really well-phrased question because we talk a lot about prioritization with our leadership teams. Again, from a size perspective, our typical company, we're starting with usually 3 to 10 million of EBITDA. And these smaller businesses, they have relatively smaller teams, and taking on too much too fast can be an overall impediment to growth if you don't focus on the key elements of value creation and how that can move the needle. But in terms of how we think about that prioritization, like I was just talking about, the first 2 to 3 new hires, that's very, very high up on the list. Again, like with the specialty sales example, we needed to hire a new CFO and a new sales leader, and we got that done right out of the gate. And they both, over the course of our 4-year hold period, added a ton of value to the business. Brothers International is another good example. That business was more acquisitive out of the gate, which drove the need for a VP finance and a senior VP of supply chain to start to take advantage of some of the cross-selling opportunities and consolidated supplier opportunities of the combined businesses. So team is very much the first thing that we focus on. And then it becomes more nuanced and unique to the specific company. But again, I think as I mentioned earlier, first and foremost, we're focused on organic growth. There's a lot of ways to make a buck in private equity, even within lower middle market private equity. But what we don't do is underwrite like a site-based business where we're going to try to get 30 add-ons done over the course of our investment thesis. And the add-ons are really critical to driving our IRR or our MOIC. We're underwriting the organic growth case for that company. And the organic growth, the EBITDA growth specifically of the business, we need to have conviction that that can generate a 3x plus return for our fund, for our investors. If we don't see that path organically, that's just not a deal for Benford Capital. So again, from a prioritization perspective, in the first year, it's executing on or starting to execute on some of those organic growth pillars, and that could be new product development, that could be entering a new geography, like I was mentioning with the specialty sales example. That could be going after new customer opportunities, which was a key part of the brothers' growth strategy, specifically taking market share and growing our share of wallet with the existing customer base. It could be a pricing opportunity organically. You know, perhaps the company has a really strong value proposition, but they're not strategically pricing that or pricing it appropriately high enough relative to the value proposition, and then executing on those. And then our view on M&A, we like M&A. We've had transformational growth come from acquisitions at several of our businesses. So we are at the Benford Capital level mapping that out, identifying, usually it's 2 to 5 really high priority targets that we would like to try to buy over our ownership period. But those take time. You know, they're not under our control. You have to have the stars align as it relates to seller's willingness to transact. The valuation needs to line up for everybody. And then that all has to happen within our ownership period. But the brothers and specialty sales have made very accretive add-ons. Again, specialty sales made 2. We sold the business in 2022. Brothers has done 2 to date over the 3 years that we've owned it. And that's pretty typical in terms of the profile and type of add-ons that we look for at our portfolio companies.
Yeah, and for our listeners, private equity, as many of you know, love the multiple arbitrage and the post-integration synergies and the expanded TAM and capabilities of add-on acquisitions. So it's a beautiful lever to pull. So
Yeah.
you mentioned
One
earlier.
one of the things I wanted to mention, I apologize, Rob. One other thing I forgot to mention too, on that team build, that's a really important part of what we do at the lower end of the lower middle market. There's one of the biggest risks we take in any of these businesses would be the key man risk around the founder or around the entrepreneur, the second or third generation family member that might be stepping away. So it's identifying who are the key people in the business, what roles and responsibilities do they have on their plate, what's their go forward role, and then what do we need to do to supplement their activity. We joke sometimes there are businesses that we'll look at where the founder is effectively the CEO, the CFO, the VP of sales, the VP of ops, the head of supply chain, and he's doing all those things, right? And so that could also fall into the bucket of life's too short or the return on time to backstop him, to do all the nation building and the team building, especially if that person wants to retire, if he's 75 years old and wants to retire in 12 months, that might be a situation that we don't take on. Or we need to be paying a price that's low enough that reflects the risk and the work that we're going to take on to do that. But we're highly cognizant of that type of risk. At the other end of the spectrum is a situation like Brothers International, 40-ish CEO, founder, very hard charging, a lot of fire in the belly, 20-year runway, has already built a terrific team. That's an easier deal situation for us. And again, they can both turn into exceptionally successful private equity deals, but it's just different as it relates to the team build and the risk assessment, and also that prioritization in year one, like you were asking about.
Yeah, sounds good. And lower middle market deals don't have the luxury of deep benches, and so succession planning and key man risk is always at the fore, even with plans in place, no doubt. So you mentioned earlier that plans change. It's a living, breathing document. So how often do you revisit the VCP, and how do plans change?
Yeah. So I mean, we revisit it quarterly. So as part of our quarterly board meeting, well, I guess let's back up. So when we close a new deal, we put in place a formal budget for that first year. And oftentimes that's the first time that new company has ever gone through a budgeting process. And then we're defining the roles and the key roles on the team and the goals for each of those key leadership team members as part of the value creation plan. And again, all tied back to the budget. So quarterly, when we meet in person with the business, we're reviewing that and looking at where we're at as it relates to progress against the budget and the financials, but also those qualitative goals that tie into the value creation priorities for that year. And then how do things change? I mean, um, a lot can change, but I guess a specific example, like if the inorganic growth opportunity, if the M&A story comes to fruition faster, that can change things in a really positive way, which was the case at Brothers. I mean, not too long after we closed, we got one of our really high priority M&A targets, one of our add-on targets under LOI. And that was the first add-on that the company had ever done. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of education, kind of creating the space and the time for the CEO to be able to work on that, and also thinking through, again, going back to the team needs. There was the add-on that we did had two founders, one of whom wanted to retire, one of whom wanted to keep going. So getting the comp plans and the deal structure all lined up to backstop that type of dynamic is a way that the value creation plan can change. At specialty sales, we had things also don't always go, there's, path to success is not always a straight line. We had a bad surprise on some of our commodity input costs in the first year of that investment. And all of a sudden, pricing strategy and sourcing moved way up the list in terms of what we needed to focus on to right size our cost structure and make sure that we had our pricing right to the end customer to compensate for the fact that those input costs were higher than what we underwrote at the initial deal.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you hit both sides of the coin, because maybe I'm too vigilant, but when I think of changing value creation plans, I think of adjusting to things that didn't go maybe as well as they could have out of the gate. And so of course you're going to make those changes, but the same is true when you're ahead of schedule and you've made more progress than anticipated. We're going to double down, and we're going to absolutely try to get that deal to that elusive 6, 7, or 10x MOIC outcome.
Yeah. No, you're always reacting to new information. They have to be, living, breathing documents, and things can change. Like a competitor can change their strategy. You can get a new entrant from a product perspective. You can have, the M&A opportunity can really, because the M&A opportunity, it's hard to have perfect line of sight on that, in terms of what might be actionable, or just how big or small the add-ons are, how fragmented the TAM might be. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can change. And part of being a successful, long tenured investor in the lower middle market is adaptability, because no two days are the same. That's for sure.
The only constant is change itself.
Yeah.
So knowing that our audience is primarily made up of executives of portfolio companies and those that are ready to make the move from larger corporate into PE, what's the one thing, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but what's the one thing executives can do to really add maximum value in partnership with their private equity firms as it relates to either development of or adaptation of an evolution of the VCP over the whole period?
Yeah. It's a really good question. First, I would say, well, let's maybe talk about it with two different roles in mind, the CEO and the CFO. From a CEO perspective, really kind of taking ownership or partnership with Benford Capital, with BCP in that plan from the early days of the investment, I think is, again, it sounds very straightforward and intuitive, but sometimes CEOs can get really bogged down in the weeds of their business and just the day-to-day and the day-to-day execution. And it does require time management to take a step back and think about where we're going 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now, and just really having clear alignment and communication with the private equity partner. I think that's probably the advice I would give at the CEO level, because our most successful CEOs, I mean, they're very execution oriented and they know their businesses exceptionally well, but they're also able to quickly get out of the trees and see the forest and communicate really effectively to the board, but also communicate that vision to their direct reports and then make that happen at company level. For the CFO role, which is, that's much more often a new position, somebody that we're recruiting into the company, and the company hasn't had that role before. It's twofold. I think first, it's the CFO is reporting to a founder. Usually the CFO is coming from an environment that is a little bit more corporate and professionalized, but having an appreciation for the way things have been done at the company to date and really kind of earning the right to make changes, again, with the CEO's blessing, with the board's blessing. But that's a fine line. You want somebody that can come in and be effective and be assertive, but not push things kind of too hard, too fast, to try to make too much change too fast. So that's one area. And then secondly, once that CFO becomes much more established in the business after 6 to 12 months, becoming operationally engaged in the company would be my advice for that role and position. Again, our most successful CFOs are not just closing the books and reporting on the trend analysis and giving information to the lenders and leading the annual budgeting process. They really understand the value drivers of the business, and they're genuinely interested in it too. They're kind of acting almost like the CFO and the COO, and they're managing projects and showing strategic thinking capabilities and leadership capabilities. And again, just like the CEO, tying it all back to the longer term plan. And then for both of those folks, really important too, again, another mark of a really successful leader within any one of our companies would be that pivoting or that change that we talked about earlier. Like, hey guys, I think we should flag this and talk about something our competitors doing, or I know we've devoted CapEx and resources to a specific project, but I don't think the ROI is there anymore. Like, don't be afraid to fail fast or kind of get out of the sunk costs associated with a decision like that. So again, those would be things I would highlight as ways that the CEO and the CFO position can really succeed in the lower middle market.
Amazing. No matter what the topic or angle of private equity is, all roads lead back to speed of execution. It's amazing. So Ben, this has been wonderful. For our listeners out there, I hope this has been insightful around how you can better think through and then partner with your private equity firms, either current or future, on the all too essential value creation plan. Ben, before we go, any final thoughts?
No, I think this has been a really good discussion, Rob. Again, we're passionate about what we do, and we appreciate the relationship with FALCON, and we've got another search coming up soon. So if you have any really highly qualified CFO candidates listening to this that have a desire to live in the Detroit, Michigan area, please reach out.
It's always great when podcasts and business development collide. That's
Yes,
not so bad.
exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
well, we appreciate you and the multi-year partnership that we continue to be excited about in the future. So Ben, thanks again for joining us, and we'll have you back sometime down the road if you're willing.
Okay, Rob, thank you. Appreciate it, and take care.